Welcome to Scoop World Order. We are out of the bye week, and it is go time for the Ohio State Buckeyes. They're getting ready for 5-0 Maryland. There's a lot of news on the horizon, recruiting-wise. We had a decommit. We've got a potential SEC flip coming. We're going to break that film down. Position of need, big-time position of need. Potentially, we have a couple guys to leave early for the NFL draft. There's going to be a lot on the plate of Ryan Day over these next few months, evaluating who to take the final few spots, who to go after in the portal. I feel like, I know that the tampering is already going on between most schools. Kids that aren't playing as much are reaching out, trying to figure out where their new home's going to be. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this roster looks at this time next year. Welcome to the new world of college football. It is just like the NFL, where they have free agency and a draft. It's kind of the same thing with recruiting and a transfer portal. So we're going to get into that. Talk about this October, which is very scary and especially brutal for Ohio State with Maryland. Then a noon game against Purdue. It was announced it would be on Peacock, followed by Penn State, the big one, and then at Camp Randall for a very spooky end to October. So we're going to break all that down. But first, as always, we appreciate you guys. Thank you guys so much for joining us each and every night. If you enjoy this content, please leave us a like, click subscribe, and also click on that little bell. It'll let you know when we go live so you guys can jump in here, jump into the chat, get that chat fired up. Shout out where you guys are watching from. I saw Portsmouth, I saw Wheelersburg, I saw a lot of my Southern Ohio boys in here. Appreciate all of you. Saw Northwest Ohio, I saw Milan, Ohio, I saw Sandusky. Tons of people in here. Appreciate each and every one of you. Florida, Georgia, Texas, Los Angeles. All you guys are watching from everywhere. Thank you for all that. And real quick, what game in October are you most concerned about? Is it Maryland? Is it at Purdue, which has been a house of horrors for us? Is it Penn State, which is the best team on the schedule? Or is that Camp Randall at night in a game where the Fighting Fickles will be all tuned up? With that being said, I'm going to bring in someone who's always tuned up, Mr. Nevada Buck. Nevada, how are you tonight?
I'm doing good, man. We're getting ready, getting to the meat of the schedule. Big stretch drive here the next 4 weeks. And Maryland, great. Saw a stat the other day that said there's only 3 teams in college football that haven't allowed a 40-yard play from scrimmage this year. And one of the 3 is the Ohio State Buckeyes. So, you look at one of the points of improvement for Ohio State this year was cut down in the big plays. Last year we allowed 18 of those during the season. This year we haven't allowed 1. I know that'll probably put the triple jinx on them by talking about it, but I thought it was worthy of note. Just another thing to kind of look at to say, hey, this defense is being more fundamentally sound, doing things the right way. Not that they're not going to ever give up a big play or have a bad possession or a bad game, but looking good. Defense is looking good and kind of carrying the team right now. It's kind of exciting.
Who is the coordinator for the defense for Ohio State?
That would be Jim Knowles, future Broyles Award winner Jim Knowles, assistant coach of the year.
Will he be the first assistant coach in Ohio State history to have a statue placed right next to Woody Hayes outside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center? Do you believe?
I believe that he should. I believe that he should, and that maybe they'll change the name from the WAC, the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, to the Jim Knowles, the Jack, and we'll put that out there, and that'd be great, But he's worthy of it. You guys, there's room on the Jim Knowles Express. I'm driving on the conductor, so jump aboard, choo. Let's go.
Yeah, it is pretty funny. Just again, I think that the defense has been outstanding so far this year. They've got some major pieces coming up with Penn State, Wisconsin. What game are you? I don't want to say nervous about, but what game do you have the most trepidation about picking? Obviously, we pick Ohio State to win every game. This is who we are. But really, it's those last 2. Penn State hasn't beaten us at home in a long time. And then I think it was 2008, actually. I mean, that was a Terrell Pryor game. And then Wisconsin, at Wisconsin, we've lost her a few times. Not very often, but we've lost her a few times. Which of those 2 games are you more worried about?
Boy, it's. I think that Purdue game is sneaky tough too. Like I think that Purdue game is, I think Purdue's a little better than people think, and that one, I really am going in with the mindset that I just want to win every game by a point. I don't care about style points. I don't care about covering the spread. I don't care about anything. I just want to win. If we win the next 4 games by a total of 4 points, I'm a happy camper, and you won't hear a peep out of me because it's going to be a tough stretch. But we're better than everybody on the roster, on the schedule, and certainly better than these 4 teams, and we should win. But then going out and doing it is another thing altogether. And that Purdue game, kind of that game before the big stretch with Penn State, and on the road, and there's a lot of little sneaky things about that. So just gonna have to be ready. The team's gonna be put to the test. I guarantee you, there will be times during the season when we're gonna have to dodge some bullets. No team ever goes through a season unscathed. We went through the Notre Dame game coming down to the last play. There's going to be at least a handful more of those games where it's going to come down to the last play, one call, one possession. So better take your Tums and have strong intestinal fortitude, because it's not easy. It's not easy navigating the big, and these next 4 weeks are going to be a super hard challenge starting this week with Maryland.
Yeah, I agree. I think that every good team that we've had has either had a loss, like you look at our last two national championship teams, Virginia Tech that was one of the worst losses in school history at home. Virginia Tech ended up being like a 7-6 outfit, so it wasn't like a dominant Virginia Tech team. They actually lost the next week at home to East Carolina after they beat the mighty Buckeyes, who went on to win the national title. Then in 2002, we didn't lose, but man, we had Holy Buckeye, we had Illinois in overtime. We had a lot of games that were tight. They were, the Cincinnati game was real tight. Again, it was kind of like, heart attack helper the whole year as we went through the season. And even, in 06, a year where, we went wire to wire number one until the last game, we played Illinois, a team that was 2-10 or something terrible. And we beat them like 17-10 or something crazy like that. It was some really low score where I think it was 17-0 in the first half, and then they scored 10 in the second half, and we didn't score again. So that was a weird game. Again, that was a team that wasn't playing for anything, but we didn't show up. We didn't play well. And, again, do I think Michigan State could be that team? No. But they gave Iowa all they wanted at Iowa. Now, granted, Iowa can't score like we can, but still, they played at Kinnick, which is a tough place to play. And Iowa's got a fantastic defense like always. And, they were able to eke out a win on a pick six of all plays. So I think, the season is it'll be a good test. Again, there's a lot of luck involved in winning a national championship. I don't care what anybody says. If you lose a couple top players to injury, it's significantly harder, which is why that 14 team is so incredible that they lost their top two quarterbacks and still won the title. That'll probably never happen again for the rest of our lifetimes. But I think that, that Wisconsin game is going to be tricky because they're going to have a big game. I love that the Penn State game is at noon as opposed to a night game, just because it gives the guys almost an extra 12 hours of recovery, which, again, doesn't seem like much. I know most fans don't care. They don't understand that. But I think it's big to get that win against Penn State, move on to Wisconsin. You get an extra 12 hours of study when you're on the coaching staff. So that'll be really interesting to see how they handle Penn State and then move into Wisconsin. Because, again, most people don't think Wisconsin can win, but I think that they've got a really good tailback. They're going to try, like everybody does, to shorten the game, run the ball, play defense, keep Marvin and Emeka off the field. That tailback is really good, and they're starting to come along a little bit. I don't think they're great, but, again, out there, anything can happen. We are going to get a little bit into recruiting, which is something that is starting to perk up a little bit as a lot of these kids are through 6 and 7 weeks of their high school seasons. There's some tape out of them now. Mark Nave, sadly, was asked to leave the class, essentially just because he hasn't developed the way they wanted to. Again, I think it's never an easy conversation. It's the same thing as when guys get here and they ask them to portal out or process them out. I think it's easier to do it when they're still in high school because they can still land somewhere that's more appropriate to their talents. I think that guys like Justin Fry and Mark Piantoni and Ryan Day, when they take a guy who's a fringe guy like Mark Nave, you have to lay out certain specific measurable goals, whether it's a weight loss plan, whether it's a strength plan. Say, hey, you need to develop this on film. We've done that. I've sat in there. We took a kid named Tim Gardner, who was a project O lineman. We wanted him to lose 30 pounds in like 2 months, and he did. And we wanted him to be able to run, a 5.140 or 5.240, whatever, and he did. Like we gave all these measurable goals, and magically the kid, he hit all of them. So it makes it a lot easier to turn the kid away if you say, hey, look, we asked you to do all this, and you didn't. So, it's like if someone says, hey, if you could lose 40 pounds for $1 million, would you do it? Yeah, you could do it. If you say, 40 pounds for $10, you might not probably do it. So it's a measurable thing. I think Nevada, as we get into Mark Nave, What were your thoughts on that as it all went down? Again, I don't mind processing kids because I think that's just what big boys do. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think embracing roster management. Yeah, look, Nick Saban in Alabama and the SEC schools did this earlier than anybody. And I think it's one of the big reasons why they went on their big run. I've likened it many, many times to playing cards where you're playing draw poker, but you keep getting to throw your cards in and pick cards until you like your hand. And if you could do that, more than once, if Ohio State's only doing it once and I'm playing and I'm doing it 5 times, then I'm going to beat Ohio State most of the time, with the cards. And I think Saban did that, embraced it, and like you said, it's an awful part of the business. It's kind of unseemly, and it seems very Ohio State like, but it's just the reality. It's just the way it is in 2023, and better to do it now to feel like cut your losses before you have a kid. And the worst thing to do is we've talked about many, many times. It's not the kids you miss on that kill you; it's the kids you get that can't play and tie up scholarships that kill you. So they're just trying to head that off before it gets to that point, and probably best for all involved. But as you said, doesn't feel good. But it's just it's big boy football 2023. You have to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand, like, Ryan Day has fired coaches. Again, if you're a head coach, sometimes if it ain't up to stuff, because if you don't get it to where it needs to be, then you're going to get fired, And at the end of the day, Ryan's going to look at his wife and his kids and look them in their eyes and, okay, am I doing everything I can to make sure that, we keep this job and we keep our standard of living? And if there's an area that needs to get changed, again, like when he took over, I mean, he whacked Greg Schiano right away, Bill Davis right away. He whacked Stud, brought in, different people. He fired Al Washington. He's, Kerry Combs. Like, he's not shy to whack guys. So, again, like when you want to keep that standard or get that standard to where it needs to be, you can't be shy, and you have to make very, very tough decisions that affect people's families. And, they do it to coaches, so you might as well do it to players too. And honestly, for Mark Nave, like, I think that it's the best thing that could ever happen to him, because there's nothing worse than he shows up here. He's clearly out of place. He's clearly a kid that couldn't make it. And again, I have no bones against Mark Nave, but I've seen us take guys. When I was a grad assistant, we took a class of like 5 guys, and none of them could play at Ohio State. And it was just, I have no idea what we were looking at when we were recruiting them. And I'm not trying to bag on anybody, but those guys showed up, and I was like, none of these guys have a prayer. Because usually, like within the first 2-3 days, you can tell if guys will be able to make it, just because they can hang in there a little bit. They're smart. They're tough. They've got the if they're not there yet as freshmen, you can at least see like a window where they could eventually get there if they work hard and they work with Coach Mick and all that. Because most linemen aren't ready to go the first day, but most of them, you can see that intensity and you can see that desire. But with some guys, that there's no chance ever, because they don't have the mental fortitude. Physically, they'll never be there. And we took a class of 5 of those guys, and I was terrified. So I would have cut all those guys, but again, I wasn't in a position to be the recruiting guy. So with that being said, we do have a potential flip candidate coming on board. Kid named Marius Williams, who's a really, really good-looking defensive end. They have him listed at 6'3", 270. I don't think he's 270. If he's 270, he's a very fast and explosive 270. He's committed to Florida right now, offered by Ohio State today. Again, Ohio State doesn't put these offers out unless there's almost 100% chance that they feel like they can flip the kid. Like, they're not just offering a committed kid to offer him for the heck of it. But we do need another D end. We riffed on Dylan Stewart and a bunch of other kids. This kid's tape is actually really good, so I'm going to dig into that real quick. Nevada, do you think as the season goes on with the tape coming in, how many do you think there's going to be a lot more offers extended, maybe 5, 10? And if you were Mark Pantoni, Justin Fry, Ryan Day, Larry Johnson, how much of if you had a percentage play of how many offers you had, say you had 5 offers if you're the offensive line coach, how many would you dedicate towards high school players versus the transfer portal?
Man, on offensive lineman is a development position. Look at me telling you the great offensive lineman about offensive lineman, but it's a development position. I liken it to like goalie in hockey, where the guys generally get better older. So it's one of those things. It's very hard to project coming right out of high school. So I'd probably be like 40% offers to high school kids and probably 60% portal kids, because I want to know what I'm getting, and maybe 50-50, but I think that's the way that you've got to go. And I think we're going to see more of that kind of going forward as Ohio State kind of embraces it. But on a kid like Amaris Williams, if they're not making an offer unless they feel like they got him. They're not just throwing this stuff out there. This is just one of those ones. When I heard him, the first thing I thought when I saw him was like he's almost like kind of like Jamal Marcus, without some of the other issues. But he's a heck of a player, man. I mean, his tape's impressive. If you haven't watched it, take a few minutes and do, because he's a high impact kind of kid.
I mean, I think this is him at running back. I think. I mean, it has to be. Watch this. I mean, the first play he just blows by a tackle who's overrun, but here truck stick. I mean, he's carrying the ball like a loaf of bread. But hey, I mean, and again, I don't think this is great football, but the kid, this has got to be him, right? I mean, he's the guy running the ball. So, I mean, again, I don't think he's 270. Like, I would love to be down there and put him on a scale, because if this is really 270, which I don't think it is, he's probably 260, 255. But this is still floating. I mean, he's going against some guys now. This guy, again, like. I don't think this is great competition when they're turf monstering each other, but again, like this kid, you can see the measurables. You can see, again, it's a lot like Jamal Marcus. Like Jamal Marcus's tape was one of the most unbelievable tapes I've ever seen for a recruit. And like, I remember we watched it, Urban Meyer literally said, "Why is this not the number one player in the entire country?" Like, I mean, his film was like that good. And we got to know Jamal, very nice kid. Had a lot of work to do to get into school, to get his test scores up, to get all that done. So that was a big reason why he wasn't number one, is because of his grades. But he got there, and he had that nice Orange Bowl against Clemson, and he's a kid that he should have been in the league. Obviously, he got sidetracked, but this is a kid. This is why. You kind of earn your money working. This is kind of like the waiver wire in fantasy football. Like, I mean, these guys aren't guys that you initially took or thought to take or thought to offer over the summer. And then, a lot of these guys get better. They get better over the summer, and then they show up for their senior year, and they're playing like they're men on a mission, and they're dominant. And again, I love this kid's film. Again, I think you need speed. Like, I think that we have a deficit when it comes to speed and speed rushing. And this kid's got a lot of speed. Now, I don't think that these linemen that he's going against are great, but again, you can see the tools, you can see what you want to work with. You can always get these guys coached up, but when guys can run like this and they're bigger dudes, when they're the 6'3", 270s, and they end up being DNs, and if you get their hands tuned up, these guys can be dynamic pass rushers. And again, we've spoken ad nauseum, we have to get more production from a sack perspective out of the DNs. Like, I know that they cage rush, and I know that they're not allowed to spin. And frankly, when I was watching, did you watch the Jets versus the Chiefs last night at Nevada?
Yeah, I had the Chiefs -8, so the Mahomes going down on the 1 yard line in the last play was less than optimal for Nevada Buck.
I'm really sorry. I did not know that. I did not mean to bring that up. But that being said, you can see why you would cage rush, because what did Mahomes kill the Jets with? His feet. I mean, he had that long scramble to convert on, I don't know if that was 2nd and 30 or 3rd and 30 or whatever it was. He ran right up the middle. And again, that's why, you cage rush and you contain rush, because the Jets lost contain probably 10 times last night. And then they also kind of quit on their pass rush. They left these humongous lanes, which is something that you don't really see a ton of that with our guys when they pass rush. You don't see these big gaping lanes in the middle of the offensive line or off to the side, because of how they're taught to rush, because of the cage rush. They're trying to keep these guys boxed in where they can't run, all over the place when we play man coverage like the Jets did. The Jets play man, and they tell the defensive ends, hey, do twists and loops and don't worry about contain, or either that or guys just flat are just losing contain. And Pat Mahomes killed him. He diced him up running the ball. But yeah, I like this kid a lot. But yeah, I go back and forth. Obviously, you want more sacks out of the DNs, but when the defense is giving up like 7 points a week, you can't really, I don't know, you can't really complain. I can't complain about that. I mean, all I care about is points. Like I said, I'm not a stats guy. I know some people love sacks and all that stuff. TJ Watt's got a lot of sacks, and they gave up 30 points to the Texans yesterday. So I'd rather have good team defense. But yeah, what do you think? What do you think of this kid, Nevada? I mean, I think we're gonna get him. Good-looking kid. It'll be interesting to see how many of these kids that we didn't offer that are high school seniors that we start offering off of tape, because I think that's going to be, those are about to be coming out over the next couple weeks to get these guys up here for official visits.
Yeah, no, I'm like you said, speed. I mean, speed's everything. I mean, even watching Duke. I mean, Duke's defensive line was, their interior guys, their ends. I mean, they were guys that could get after it. And I think if I've got one complaint about the defense, it is that we are lacking. We're lacking that speed rusher. I mean, obviously, I mean nobody's going to have a Khalil Mack, but after watching him get 5 sacks or 6 sacks or whatever the heck he got yesterday,
Mhm.
you just that speed and bend around the edge. We're missing that. And so for them to go out there and get guys like this that can kind of go do it, hey, I'm all about that. You can never have enough of those guys. And Ohio State thinks really highly of this one, and they think they're getting this kid. So could be time to get excited.
I think, it's interesting you bring up the Khalil Mack game because I watched that whole game because I have Josh Jacobs and Devontae in fantasy. And it's like, eventually, like, it goes on the coordinator, which is Josh McDaniels, when you have a matchup that is that bad, that overwhelming. Jermaine Alamallur, the right tackle. I mean, I was like, God, please put in Thayer Munford. He could hang in there with Khalil better than that. But when you have a guy like that give up 6 sacks, eventually that's on a scheme deficiency because you have to help that guy. It's like if you have a corner going against Tyreek Hill in man coverage and he's getting scorched, eventually you have to help him. You don't let Tyreek get off for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns because you're like, oh, you're a cornerback. Go out there and check the guy. Eventually, you have to help guys. And again, I feel bad for the guy that was the right tackle just because he clearly, he had a rookie quarterback who held the ball for too long. He thought he was still at Purdue playing Indiana, and he's in the league now where these pass rushers are legit. And sometimes it's not on the tackle. Now, granted, 6 sacks is still 6 sacks, and you're not supposed to give up 6 sacks. But if quarterbacks just have no sense of urgency to get rid of the ball and they get taken down by a guy who's really good, then eventually that's on them. And it's on the scheme because there's no reason that they should have just left that guy on an island against Khalil Mack because that was ridiculous. But there's my diatribe. Again, I think that starting off this season against Indiana and when we had new tackles, like we did a lot of good stuff to help those guys get comfortable, and then we've given them less and less help as the weeks have gone on, and I think that's important. But when we see Chop Robinson, who's at Penn State, who's probably the best end on our schedule, and we see some of these guys at Michigan, help those guys out a little bit. You don't have to just throw them out there, and pray that they can just do everything one on one. Like there's a lot of ways to help tackles and help guards when they're playing a dominant player. Now there's not a lot of dominant players in the Big Ten on defense this year, but when we see those guys, it never hurts to help a little bit. Well, we'll wrap this thing up. Any final thoughts, Nevada? Again, I love this kid's film. I think he's going to be fantastic. Be interesting to see if Mark is the only guy they process or if there's others, but who knows? I mean, and how many guys we lose out of the portal because those always frees up some cap spots for the roster. But any final thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think this is the week that Ohio State starts, showing some more the defensive playbook, starts showing a little bit more out of the offensive playbook, and this is they kind of built up to Notre Dame, trying to get some stuff installed, and from my information is that they're bringing more stuff out, that they feel like they're at about a 4 on a scale of 10 in terms of sophistication of what they've shown so far. So I expect to see more and more as kind of the weeks kind of go, and it's going to be fun to see how that works out because defensively, yeah, I felt that we certainly got exposed a little bit in terms of the run against Notre Dame, and my concern is what a running quarterback could do off of that run action right there, because we were having to commit safeties up there to make the tackles, and when you're committing safeties to make tackles, and then you've got a quarterback that's got a threat to keep, that can really present problems. And let me tell you what, Penn State's quarterback can run a little bit, Wisconsin's quarterback can sure run a little bit, and Michigan's quarterback can sure run a little bit. So I think that's something that we have to account for. I'm really interested to see how Ohio State kind of attacks that schematically this week. The quarterback's a little less mobile, a little less explosive, but they like to throw it a lot, and so I think that's a good strength for Ohio State. So this has got to be a game where the defensive front four takes over, wins the game for us, and I think they will. I think this is the week they break it out, and this is the week that it all happens.
Um, you know, much more diversity in the pass rushing. Because again, I know everyone's like, oh, these guys, they stink. Our two ends stink. JT and Jack, these two 5-star guys, they stink. But JT has one of the best spin moves I've ever seen on film at Ohio State, and Jack's got a nice spin move too. And I've seen it in spring games. I've seen it, in practice. I mean, I've seen it, and I've seen him hit Paris with it and sack. I mean, he had Paris with a spin in the spring game that was like Dwight Freeney 2 years ago, and obviously Paris 6th overall pick, starting for the Cardinals, maybe the best tackle we've had since Orlando Pace. And Jack hit him with that spin move, and Paris was on ice skates. He had no idea where to go. And I haven't seen that. And again, I think, well, I know that they're telling these guys to contain rush, cage rush. So, it'd be interesting to see if they free some of these guys up and they let them hit some of those inside spins, because those are hard to go against. When those guys have the agility to actually hit it like JT does, I mean, JT's spin is phenomenal, but he never does it. And I don't think that's his call because, again, JT and Jack both want to go to the NFL after this year. Now, it's real hard to declare for the draft when you're a defensive end with 0 sacks. So, again, I think they're getting the itch. And again, these guys, they hear the noise. Like, JT hears the noise. Like, you're supposed to be this dominant player and you don't have any sacks on the year. And you played Youngstown State and Indiana and all these other crap teams and no sacks. So, it's going to be interesting to see if they turn them loose versus Maryland. Well, with that being said, we're going to wrap this thing up. As always, we appreciate you guys. If you guys are not members of BuckeyesGroup.com, now is the time to join it. We've got a fantastic amount of content coming your way this week as we get really into the season. There's no more bye weeks left. This is a straight football now. These guys are healthy, refreshed. I thought it was a great timing for the bye week. So now is a great time for you to jump onto BuckeyesGroup.com. All of you that are on BuckeyesGroup.com, we appreciate you guys being members of our community. It's a fantastic community. Keep it cancer-free. Keep it nice and clean. Really good people on there. And we just clear out the riffraff. So we appreciate you. As always, if you could leave us a like on your way out the door, that'd be huge. Also, click subscribe. Also, click the little alert bell if you enjoy our live content. So with that being said, shout out where you guys are watching from. Let me know who is going to make the biggest jump in the second half. There's a lot of good candidates, a lot of guys we haven't heard from at all. Mayan Williams, Dallin Hayden. Dallin Hayden was the hero of the Maryland game last year, and we haven't seen his name at all on the box score the last couple of weeks. So it'll be interesting to see who steps up and who gets rolling into the second half. So we're going to need a lot of guys to go because there's no bye weeks left, and some of these guys are going to be getting dinged up, and you got to be ready to roll. So that being said, as always, we appreciate you guys. I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Thank you so much, Buckeye Nation, and thank you, Scoop family. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Go Bucks.